Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. This is Season 11, Episode 1. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today we're talking with Cheryl Leutjen, the author and speaker on all things ecology. She has written the best-selling book, Love Earth Now. In this podcast, we'll explore the interconnectedness of all life on Earth and how we can do our part to protect our planet. I'll be talking with Cheryl about making wise choices at the supermarket and at home. If you're interested in learning more about ecology and how you can help the environment, this is the episode for you. Onward to my conversation with author Cheryl Leutjen. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. I am very happy to be having on the podcast today writer, podcaster Cheryl Leutjen. She is the author of Love Earth Now. Cheryl, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dean, very much for having me.
So, first off, for our listeners who may not be familiar with your book or your blog or your podcast, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have a mixed background, I like to say. I've gone from geology to law to writing, and the through line is I've always been concerned about what's happening with our planet, with our relationship with our planet, and how can we be better citizens. So I wrote this book, and it's really a collection of my own stories and struggles to do all of that, because it's not easy figuring out. There's no perfect answers, unfortunately. And at the same time, I feel compelled to do what I can, because if nothing else, I'm a parent, and I want a livable planet for my children and grandchildren. So I wrote the book with that in mind. And I started a podcast with a friend last spring. It's on hold at the moment, but our specific topic was considering all the decisions we make in our kitchens that have environmental impact. Because once we started thinking about it, there are a lot of decisions you make in the kitchen that have an environmental impact, from not just what food to buy, whether you buy organic or local or sustainable, but also what do you cook it with, electric or gas? We're hearing a lot more about that these days. What does the food come packaged in? And when you start to think about it, I stand in my kitchen thinking about what to make for dinner, and I get exhausted and overwhelmed just trying to filter through all those choices, and how do we simplify it and just get through some food on the table.
I go through that too. I have to get meals for a week for a family of 6. So for me, it's a lot of work, and it can be overwhelming. And everybody wants different things, and some people want a lot of stuff that's in multiple packages and may not actually be good for you. How do you handle it? What do you do on your weekly basis with your kind of getting groceries and planning meals, etc.?
Oh, it's all about compromise for me. I have a family of 4. My kids are in their 20s now and in and out of the house, but still there are things that they like, my husband likes, that are not necessarily sustainable. And yet I inform them of my beliefs and my opinions and what's important to me. And I make decisions for myself based on my own criteria, but I try not to inflict my own judgments on other people. And so I'll buy something that's plastic wrapped for my husband because it's nutritious and he needs something quick to eat before work, and he's got health concerns, and this fits all the other bills. So there's just a lot going on when I'm at the grocery store, and if you ever see me just standing in the aisle agape, that's what's happening.
So how do you kind of inform some of the choices that you make? What are some of the things you're thinking about when you're in the grocery store?
I do think about health really first and foremost, and then environmental impact is a close second. Sorry about that.
It's okay. You're good. Well, we can edit that out.
I thought I put my phone on do not disturb. Okay. I think about health first and foremost, and also environmental impact is a very close second, because if we're not taking care of the planet, we're not taking care of our health in the bigger sense, right? And
right.
So those are the considerations. I do get fruits and vegetables from a CSA box, community supported agriculture, because it's really important to me. That checks a lot of boxes for me, of course, health and plastic free and more local than at least some things that come shipped in from Peru and Chile and those kinds of. So I start with the foundation of what we're absolutely going to use all the time is fruits and vegetables and meat and dairy, and because we have different diets in the household, but we cover all the bases for when you consider all of us. And so it's a lot goes into it.
How do you tackle the problem of waste? I know that's the thing that drives me the most nuts on a weekly basis. I hate when we throw out food that's gone bad because people aren't eating it. How do you handle that?
That's a big hot button for me too. And so that's another one of those considerations standing in the grocery store aisle is how much to buy, because I want to buy things that we're actually going to eat before they go bad. And so that's a big consideration. First of all, is just not overbuying because it's on sale. And then once I do make something, I put it in glass containers in the refrigerator, up front and central. I will label things. I will remind people when they go to the kitchen, remember there's that stir fry in there before you just go get the bag of chips. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't make it, it goes into the compost bin.
What other things do you consider? Like, is packaging something you consider, or how far it's traveled?
Both. Packaging is, the biggest nightmare for me, because some things like meat and cheese, it's very difficult to find without it. Even if you get it direct from the butcher, that white paper is plastic lined. So those are places where I have to make my compromises and consider, okay, I can't get chicken breasts that are plastic free, but I can get organic, free range, and support local farmers where possible. So try to justify, 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5 of my priority list get satisfied, then I have to be good with that, because walking around feeling guilty about buying things wrapped in plastic is not going to serve me or the planet either. How far things travel, absolutely, that's very important to me. It's so tempting to buy those winter fruits that come shipped from far away, and I avoid that as much as I can and stick to things that if it comes in my CSA box, I know it's in season and I know it's come within a certain geography. And so I could at least say, and I buy my eggs from a local person. Even here in Los Angeles, there's a lot of backyard hen farmers. So I buy what I can local, and then and really pay attention to the packages in the store before I buy things, to consider just how far it is. I don't remember the statistics on it, but the amount of emissions just by moving our food around the planet is quite high. And that,
Yeah, I mean, I've read some crazy article that they've eased restrictions, so allowing basically China can purchase chicken from us, have it shipped to China, have it processed there, and then shipped back to the United States, which seems bonkers to me. I mean, is that something you think about when you purchase stuff? I mean, I know I'm like looking at stuff going, is this chicken, has it crossed the Atlantic or
is it
Pacific
better
several
travel?
times?
My chicken better travel than I am.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's something that's going to be hard to track down if your chicken has been shipped to China, processed and returned. I had not heard about that. So that's another thing that's going to keep me up at night. But with my CSA box, they do work with some local farmers and meat providers. So I get a lot of the meat that we eat from local sources. Hopefully it's not been shipped to China and back.
Yeah. What about food prep appliances and utensils? What are some of the things you think about when you work with things like that?
Right. I do have a drawer full of plastic spatulas and such from, prior days, because I also don't like to throw things out that are still have a useful life. And when I go to buy something now, I try to be more mindful, and, there's so many options with silicone and the like that are very useful for food preparation. We happen to have an electric cooktop and electric ovens in our house when we did our kitchen remodel many years ago. It just happened that was what worked best for our needs anyway. So I don't have to having a gas stove. And I mean, I get that it's a big thing to replace if that's something they're concerned about, is indoor emissions from gas stoves. So I do think about also food storage. There are some really great and attractive and appealing plastic containers out there, and I really steer towards buying glass now, silicone lids, and again, keeping the old stuff, because I don't throw things out just because, the time my awareness has changed.
Yeah. I've seen recently that Target has some really nice glass containers, and that's always heartening when some of the major distributors start stepping up and providing different things.
Absolutely. That's always a sign to me that what my little concerns are becoming more broadly embraced and recognized, I guess.
What about cooking prep products? What is that a consideration when you start planning your meals for the week and things like that?
Cooking prep products, would you help me understand that?
Yeah, like do you use plastic wrap versus resealable sealing lids or silicone baked cooking sheets?
Right. Pretty much all silicone in that regard right now. Reusable. I have some of those cloth lids that have the elastic bands. I have some silicone. I have use not too much saran wrap kind of things anymore.
Yeah, they make all kinds of neat stuff now. A lot of really great stuff is out. I really love the silicone mats myself. I use those all the time now.
Yeah, I think they work better than even just using the can of Pam spray.
Yeah. What about food storage? What do you consider when you work with that aspect of it? Because I know that food storage is one of the hardest things to do in the refrigerator. Like, do you like usually have enough room in the refrigerator? Are you able to like kind of juggle everything in there? For me, it's always kind of like Jenga.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. We do have a standing freezer, and because I like to cook in bulk, and
Yeah.
and so it's nice to be able to freeze a lot of things, because the refrigerator gets to be a bit of a free for all in there. So if it's frozen, I actually keep a list of what's in my freezer, so I remember, maybe, hopefully, and so I check that before I go buy something new, and say, okay, this is what we've got in the freezer, I can use up. If I've made, a vegetable broth and I have a bunch of jars in it, I need to get to remember to take it out of the freezer before going buy a carton of it.
You said you do some cooking in bulk. Do you make a lot of meals ahead of time and make like big pots of stuff?
Some things lend themselves to that, yes. Not everything. I eat a lot of salad. I don't like made ahead salads, but for the
Yeah.
most but anything, more casserole-ish or spaghetti or chili or any of those kinds of things, yeah, we make a lot and freeze some.
Now we talked about food waste. What about the outputs of cooking, ahead of time, trying to be mindful? What are some of the things, you deal with as far as like compostable things and food waste and recyclable plastic? How do you deal with that?
It's a mental puzzle, constantly trying to figure out where things go. And I have an area that's even just a sorting center. I'm not sure where this is going yet, but definitely things that go to compost, prioritize, get that out into the compost, feel good about that. And now our city, it actually allows us to put compostables in the green bin. So things that I can't very well compost in my home bin, like chicken bones, could go into our green bin. So really grateful for that. That's added it, reduced my guilt by a tenfold, I would say. So that's nice. Certainly, the things that just can't be recycled, and frankly, I question what is being recycled right now, at least from what we're reading. It seems like just having a number on the bottom of your yogurt container doesn't mean it's going to be recycled, and it's hard to know at any given moment what is being recycled. But I heard that anything smaller than a yogurt cup and that means lids and straws, doesn't get recycled. It's just too small to be filtered out. So those unfortunately have to go into the black bin, and anything that there's a hope or a prayer of being recycled, including the glass and aluminum cans, of course, goes into recycling.
I wanted to ask you, circle back and ask you about your book, Love Earth Now. Can you talk a little bit with our audience about how you came to write the book and what kind of the feedback was from the book after you wrote it?
Yeah, I just started out writing a series of stories because writing is good therapy for me when I don't know what else to do. I can take my frustrations out on the page, and if I share it with somebody who relates, that's even better. And if not, I've still gotten my therapy. So I started out just writing stories, and I started a meetup group for people who wanted to write out in nature called the Natural Muse. And so I got myself, and I use that as my accountability partner, of course. If people are waiting on me, I will go out and do it. So gets me out into nature and writing. And I wanted that awareness to shape what I was writing about, because just sitting in my house, I don't get the breadth of new ideas that comes from sitting in a different environment and really looking around and looking at the trees and realizing really what is at stake when we make these decisions. And I make my compromises, and also writing helps me get out the rants. So I think that's something that people relate to when they read my book, is that I'm not presenting myself as an expert who has all the answers. I'm struggling just like you are. Here's my struggles. And then at the end of each chapter, there's what I call an invitation, where the reader can pause for a moment and reflect on what's happening in their own lives. How do they make decisions? What's bugging them? What are they going to do about it, kind of thing. Because at the end of the day, I think we each have our own calls to action when it comes to caring for our earth. And good that we do. I don't one size fits all solutions. If we all change out our light bulbs, the planet will be saved, and end of story. I think we're all here for a different purpose, and we all have different gifts and abilities. And my real goal in writing is to inspire people to think for themselves about, what am I doing? Is there something I want to change? Is there something I want to congratulate myself for doing that I have been doing, kind of thing. On the other
What
hand,
else?
some people that read my book and say, there's nothing in here. I want somebody to tell me to do this and not that, and end of story. So telling you now, if that's the book you're looking for, this Love Earth Now is not it.
Well, what I loved about the book and what I love about your writing in general is that there's so much of it that, you really seem to be like the rest of us. Like, we're trying to figure it out. You're trying to make sense of this because, we live in a society where we have a need to do this, but there's not a lot of cohesiveness with, like, I think city governments are just now starting to do things like having compost bins. I know that Los Angeles just announced they're doing compost in some areas where they weren't doing it before. And like, we just started doing it recently ourselves. So I know that's just starting to happen for many people. And like, there's a lot of things where I think city governments aren't really catching up until just now. So, I
Well, also,
mean,
I would argue it's the manufacturers too. I mean,
yeah,
we're putting all the onus on the end user, when it's at the very outset, when it would be easiest to make decisions that would give us more ecological decisions, options to have.
absolutely. And I really think that, we kind of muddle along, but we don't always know what to do. And that's what I love about your writing, is that, you're kind of struggling with this like the rest of us. I've read a lot of authors that are kind of imperious and they're like, here, do this, or this, but it's not always realistic. And
Mhm.
your books seem to be realistic. And I really enjoyed that. And I like that about your writing, is that, it comes from a kind of a human level, not like a kind of imperious kind of know-it-all level, which I've seen. I'm not going to name names. There are authors out there that are like that. We know who they are, but they also have butlers and
Right. Yes. They're writing their books at jet plane.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like it's like, well, like we kind of see through that, and I see, I see the human in your writing, and I really love that. So yeah, I mean, have you had a chance to, like, I know that you tour a lot and you go and do book signings and stuff. Have you had a lot of feedback from just regular folks talking about some of this?
Yes, this is exactly as you said, it's the people that relate to the story as opposed to people who are looking for a one size fits all answer that tend to appreciate my writing more.
So I wanted to also talk a little bit about your podcast that you'd had, the Earthy Kitchen Chats. Can you talk a little bit about that, about your podcast?
Sure. As I think I mentioned, I started with a co-host, and our goal was to have real conversations, just as you said about my writing, real conversations, real people trying to make real hard, real decisions in our kitchens, realizing just how many decisions we make in our kitchens. It's overwhelming. And so we wanted to just sit down and have some conversations about how we handle things on a more practical level, and also acknowledging when there are no solutions, but also realizing what we can do and how to go about it, maybe without making yourself crazy, because if you have to stop and think about all these considerations before you prepare a simple meal, it gets to be exhausting. So my friend is a chef, and I really appreciate her input. She also has a lot of knowledge about, making in bulk and apportioning and being very cost conscious at the same time, because she's got to be cost effective for her clients. And at the end of the day, that's cost, is I haven't mentioned yet, but that is absolutely a concern. I mean, we can only do what we can afford to do too, both in terms of time and money, because we have only a certain amount of each. And so if making huge pots of meals doesn't fit into your time budget, then that's not a solution for you. And we don't mean to, suggest that anyone should feel guilty for not doing any of the things that we do. You're maybe doing something else, and we can learn from each other. So that's the topic of our conversations: is what can we do? How can we do it better? And what do we just have to let go? Because at the end of the day, there aren't any perfect solutions.
What are the things that give you hope today that you've seen, that any changes that have made that might be positive in kind of ecology or like sustainability, or trying to be more, eco-conscious?
A few things I see in the grocery stores: a lot more awareness and some signage around locally produced goods, and that reflects an awareness at some corporate level that this is something we're concerned about. And so I see a lot more interest in the CSA farm boxes, and supporting our farmers is so important. Especially family farms are, few and far between these days. And so anything we can do to support family farmers, people trying to do the right thing by the land, is good with me. And I'm encouraged by seeing a lot more interest in that. I box delivered, they're delivering up and down our street, and that makes me very happy.
What are the things that you're concerned about, the things that piss you off?
Oh, just plastic. I mean,
Yeah.
some things they're wrapped in plastic, encased in plastic, and then shipped in a box with plastics. I just can't understand how there's less awareness and concern around that than there seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be a runaway train, and I really haven't heard anybody, really addressing that. I mean, I'd like to hear Gavin Newsom talk about that a little bit, because it's something that I think we're all thinking about. I mean, so oftentimes these big industries just are like, the bull in the china shop, and we kind of get the brunt of it, and it's
Mhm.
overwhelming.
And there's no requirement that the companies that are putting all this plastic out there have any responsibility for it after it's left the factory.
No, they just rake in the money and then that's it.
Whereas if they pollute downstream, at least in theory, there's repercussions for that. They have to clean it up. But they're putting this non-recyclable plastic out into the world that's fouling waterways and polluting all kinds of places. And there's no recognition that they have any responsibility for the plastic they're putting out in the world.
Yeah, I mean, microplastics are being found everywhere, and it's really insidious to the point of I'm not even sure if we can do anything about it sometimes.
Right.
I'm
Yep.
really terrified by that.
I feel the same.
Well, Cheryl, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you, and I hope we get a chance to have you on again. I want to ask you, lastly, what's next for you? Are any plans for a follow-up book to Love Earth Now?
I do have a couple of things in the works. I have what I think will be an ebook, some follow-up essays similar to what's in the book, but things that have been on my mind since then, and more invitations. I also plan to, and I'm working on recording some of the invitations that are at the end of each chapter in the book, and also the follow-up, so that people who, because it's kind of hard to be in a reflective place while you're reading, do this, do this, do this. It's very kind of so I thought it would be helpful if readers would have access to some recordings of me speaking those invitations, and so they could be in a more state when they're contemplating.
I like that. That's really, I look forward to hearing that.
And then finally, I'm working on what I call the playbook, which is not just, it's more of the invitations expanded. In other words, here's an idea, here's a problem, here's a situation, and then more space for reflection. And for those of us who like to journal or writing it out, or making your own kind of action plan, and making some commitments around that. Because I know even for myself, it's easy to be standing in that grocery store aisle and say, I'm just going to get this. I need this. I'm tired. I don't want to think about it. Whereas if we have an action plan or made some commitments, I'm much more likely to make a better choice. So
I like that. Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Cheryl, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was my conversation with Cheryl Leutjen, who is a professional speaker and author of the book Love Earth Now. There are links to her book and website in the bio. On Wednesday, I'll be interviewing comedian Dan Adut. Dan is known for his roles in TV shows like Cobra Kai, The Crew, and Shameless. He's also a stand-up comic who's performed regularly at the Laugh Factory and all over the country. He's recently written a book called Undercooked: How I Let Food Become My Life Navigator and How Maybe There's a Dumb Way to Live. That'll be my conversation with Dan Adut on Wednesday. Until then, see you at the library.